Hi, I'm Adelia, and welcome back to Midlife Awakening. This is a podcast for women who are waking up to who they really are while navigating everything that comes with midlife. My guest today is Nicky Wake. She is a widow, sober alcoholic, serial entrepreneur, and solo parent, and her story is nothing short of extraordinary. In 2017, Nicky's husband Andy suffered a catastrophic heart attack that left him with severe brain damage. For 3 years, she lived in devastating limbo, not a widow, but no longer really married, while raising their son alone and running a multi-million-pound business. When Andy passed away in 2020, in the middle of COVID lockdown, the grief she'd been holding back finally caught up with her, and she became a highly functioning alcoholic, drinking up to 3 bottles of wine a day while somehow never missing a day of work. We talked about what rock bottom really looked like, the moment she chose rehab over another year of hiding it, and how she rebuilt her life from the ground up, including launching not one, but 3 dating and community apps for widows and sober people, embracing her bisexuality after decades of assumed heterosexuality, and finding a second chapter of love she never expected. This episode covers grief, addiction and recovery, solo parenting through trauma, midlife dating, ethical non-monogamy, and how she turned her pain into purpose. If you ever felt like your life fell apart overnight, or you're quietly using something to numb a pain you haven't fully faced yet, this conversation is for you. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Midlife Awakening podcast. I'm your host, Odelia. This is a podcast about transformation for women who are waking up to who they really are while navigating everything that comes with midlife. And I want you to know I'm on this journey right alongside you. This is the show where we explore everything from the spiritual tools that can help us in our daily practices, to healing modalities that we can use to heal what we've been carrying for so long, to the everyday midlife topics that a midlife woman faces, like perimenopause, finances, career changes, and so much more. Each week we go deeper into what it means to heal, to awaken, and to finally become the most authentic version of yourself. I'm so glad that you found your way here. Hi, Nicky. Welcome to the Midlife Awakening podcast. I'm so glad that you can join us today, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Great. Thanks for having me. Delighted to be here.
So before we get into the details of your story, how would you describe who you are today in a way that feels true for where you are right now?
I would say that I am a widow, a serial entrepreneur, a recovering alcoholic, and a solo parent to an incredible human being who's about to leave me for university in September. So in fear of an empty nest. And I found my next chapter in the I'm dating again in what I hope and I believe to be my chapter 2.
Now, you describe yourself as someone who you've had your midlife awakening, and that was through bereavement and addiction. So
it is indeed, and it was a bit of a brutal midlife awakening. Not one I'd recommend, but
no.
But yeah, thankfully I do feel like I have awoken, and I'm actually a much better, fully rounded human being as a result of that experience. And I think, I think the one thing I've learned is that, you can come through what feels like unsurmountable tragedy and find joy and hope and light at the end of that.
Yeah. And it can feel so hard and difficult when you're in it, but it's good to know that there is, you can come out on the other side. And
yeah, don't lose hope.
Yeah, amazing. So take us back to 2017 when your husband had his heart attack. What did life look like for you in the days and weeks after that?
Yeah, no problem at all. So 2017, I was living my best life. I was happily married to my soulmate. We'd been married for 15 years at that point. And we had a then 10-year-old son, Finn. We had an event management business. We'd started together. We had the perfect little family, and were busy on travels, exploring the world together and having a wondrous time. In April 2017, I was in Australia having the holiday of a lifetime with my husband and my son. Fast forward a few months, and we were getting ready to go away for a July adventure to Europe, where we'd hired a big house for the summer. And Andy started complaining about chest pains, and He refused to go to the doctors, as men do. And eventually I dragged him to the doctors, kicking and screaming, 4 more visits to the doctors. And they had diagnosed that he was having a heart attack. He got rushed to hospital. He had some stents fitted into his heart. And we took him home 3 days later. And we were toasting a lucky escape. And we went to bed that night. And I went up, but he was snoring. That's the one thing I don't miss. And so I went to the spare room. Secret to any happy marriage, as we all know. And at 6 o'clock in the morning, I was woken by the most terrible sound, and I went rushing in, and Andy was suffering another heart attack, but much, much worse than the one before. And I did CPR for 40 minutes, and I still have, PTSD from that experience. 40 minutes till the ambulance arrived. The ambulance arrived, and I went downstairs. The ambulance crew took over and asked me to leave the room. And I left the room and I went downstairs and I downed a bottle of red wine in about 10 seconds. And I think that was from that point, alcohol was linked to me thinking I could survive and get through the day. And they put Andy, they rushed him to hospital. I saved his life, but they rushed him to hospital and put him in an induced coma for 2 weeks. And at the end of those 2 weeks, his consultant came to me and said, "I'm really sorry, Mrs. Wake." They tried to bring him round from the coma. And they came to me and they said, "Mrs. Wake, I'm sorry, your story doesn't have a happy ending." And Andy had suffered a catastrophic brain injury. So he was alive, but he wasn't Andy. He'd suffered immense brain damage. He didn't know who he was, where he was, what he was. He was incontinent. He couldn't walk. He couldn't talk. Yet he was aggressive and angry and violent. And he had to be restrained to the bed at times. It was barbaric. It was like something out of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest kind of madness. And I used to wake up incredulous that this was my life. Now he was never going to be allowed home. He was so bad. He needed 24/7, round the clock, one-on-one care. And he was put into a very, very specialist nursing home for brain injuries. And so I began this awful phase of anticipatory grief, so that I knew he was never going to get better, but I didn't know when he was going to die. And it wasn't I got a choice to switch off a machine moment, that because he was technically alive and living. But I knew that Andy would have hated every second of where he was. He would have wanted to die rather than this. And so I'm thrown into this world, this limbo of not being a widow, but not being married, and having to solo parent a then 10-year-old child who I can't let see his daddy because it will be heartbreaking for him. I took a very difficult decision not to let Finn see his daddy. And run a business and employ 20 people and continue to turn over £3 million a year to keep people in jobs while all of this is going on. And I used to wake up incredulous that this was my life and that this is what it become. It was the darkest of all periods. And had I not had Finn, I'd have ended it.
It sounds horrific what you've been through. And how long was Andy in that condition before?
So Andy was in that condition for 3 years. And then in February 2020, COVID hit the headlines. And I knew there was no way that he would survive COVID. We'd had a lot of near misses with water infections and various other things. And then, sure enough, they closed the nursing homes down, and we had a call to say, "You can't come and see him." And then I got a call on the 17th of April, 2020, to say that he died. And I thought that was going to bring relief. I genuinely thought, I've done my grieving, almost like I'd been on the guest list for grief, right? I'd done the hard work. And actually, I hadn't. It completely and utterly hit me like a freight train. And it was right in the middle of COVID, and I couldn't see my friends and family. It was just me and Finn, in our own little world. And I remember that summer, I just sat in a hot tub in the garden and drank red wine continually for the whole summer. Now, everybody drank during COVID. Everyone day drank, there was those memes, wasn't there, of middle-aged women with red wine in a cup with like a herbal tea bag hanging out of it, pretending It was only that was me. And obviously after COVID, everybody stopped drinking in the day and went back to work. And I just continued to drink because it was the only way I could exist. By this point, I was a very highly functioning alcoholic. So I was drinking at my worst, kind of 3 bottles of red wine a day and probably half a bottle of vodka. And yet I was never pissed. I never missed a day's work. Finn never missed a day's school. No one had any idea. Everyone knew that Nicky liked to drink, right? My friends were always, and because I worked in the events industry, it was very acceptable. I'd have business lunches every day. I ran big awards dues where the wine was flowing because you had to hit a minimum bar spend. It was very easy. I was flying business class. It was very easy to kind of hide because a lot of friends didn't want to see. Alcoholics are very good at hiding their problems, and nobody wants to question an alcoholic. And so for 3 years, I was utterly miserable, and my health was deteriorating, and the guilt and the shame and the horror that I was going through. But I knew I had to try and find some hope and some joy again. I knew that I had to do something. So I started dating, and I thought that finding love might help heal the pain. And I downloaded Tinder, and Tinder, it's like the Wild West. It's full of dick pics and ghosting and married men. And I thought, God, this is awful. What I need to date somebody who understands. I need a widower, ideally one that looks like George Clooney, obviously. But that's what I need. So I thought, well, there must be a dating app for widows and widowers. And so I went out and I looked. And there wasn't. And I'm an entrepreneur. I drive myself insane with the business ideas I have on a daily basis. And there wasn't. So I went out and I raised 60 grand in investment. And I launched Chapter 2 Dating.app in September 2022. It's a huge media success. So in the UK, I've been in every women's magazine in the UK. I've been in every broadsheet, every tabloid. I was on the largest TV morning show. I mean, if you think Drew Barrymore in America, basically I was on that equivalent in the UK 2 weeks ago on the sofa talking about a phenomenon called Widow's Fire. Now, Widow's Fire is an interesting thing. So that's our naughty sister app. And that app is something happens when you're widowed that you feel incredibly horny. So you're aching for physical comfort. It's a natural medical reaction, and this is a recognized phenomenon. And I was conscious. I'd launched Chapter 2 Dating, which was going incredibly well, and I was trying to have functional relationships with men, and failing dismally because I wasn't ready for a Chapter 2. What I was feeling was widow's fire. So then I got the idea of starting a hookup app for widows and widowers, somewhere safe, so somewhere that could behave like Tinder, but with other people who understood. And so Widow's Fire is our naughty sister app. That was quite fun. And so all of that was going on, but no amount of business success would ease my pain. And I was still drinking terribly, and I was utterly miserable. And that's when I realized I needed to get help.
Yeah, because I was going to ask that. I was going to say, because at one point you were even taking, when you were going to visit Andy in the hospital, you were taking vodka in Coke bottles, right?
I spent literally 2 years walking around with a bottle of Diet Coke in my hand. In fact, I drink a lot of Diet Coke, and I've still got one to this day, but this one doesn't have any vodka in it. But yeah, that was how I'd go to the office and have, I'd have a red wine for breakfast. I would take a bottle of Diet Coke, which would be half filled with vodka. And yeah, you get very good at, I had wine hidden all over the house. Alcohol is the most dangerous drug. It's so easily and readily available, and it's so not a taboo. In the UK, we have a pub chain called Wetherspoons where they do, full English breakfast with a pint of beer from 9 o'clock in the mornings, and it's just it's embedded in society, and yet it was damaging my health so badly. I couldn't walk for more than 5 minutes without needing to sit down. I was shaking, and I was in a terrible state. And I tried to stop drinking a couple of times, one of which resulted in a hospital admission with a seizure. And I knew I needed to get professional help. So on Finn's 70th birthday, The week of Finn's 17th birthday, I was in a very dark place, and I decided I needed to go to rehab, and so I said to Finn the day before his 17th, I'm going to go into rehab, and he said, "That's the best birthday present you can give me," which broke my heart. And so I went into rehab, and I did a 30-day stint in rehab, and it's the best decision I ever made.
Because I was going to ask you, did he notice that what was going on?
He knew, yeah, he knew. I mean, we're incredibly close. I mean, we're actually even closer now. You know, we always had a great relationship, and he was just very worried. I mean, he'd lost his dad, and he could see that he was losing his mum before his eyes, and yet he never shouted at me. He never, you know, he knew that it had been there's no excuse for being an alcoholic, but I think it's understandable in my case from the hell that I've been through. And I don't think I would have been an alcoholic had that not happened, you know? And since I've got sober, I haven't touched a drop in, well, we're now at 19 months, I think. So, yeah, you know, and I will never drink again. For me, you know, I can't have one, and I won't have one, and I will never. I look back incredulous at quite how bad it was. Yeah, something clicked for me in rehab. It doesn't work for everybody, and I don't do AA. I don't like any of that. I've done it my own way, with hypnosis and meditation and various other things, but it works for me. And it was the best decision I ever made. And when I was in rehab, they handed me a leaflet that had the word sober sex on the front of it. And I thought, what's that then? Because I don't think I've ever had it. And I realized to my horror that dating sober was going to be harder than dating as a widow. And dating as a sober widow was really hard. And so while I was in rehab, I thought, oh, there must be a dating app for widows. There must be a dating app for sober people. And there was in the UK, you've got a great one in the US called Lucid, but in the UK, there wasn't anything really credible. So I launched SoberLove.app in March 2025. And that's going really well. We're live in the UK and the US with that, and it's only $1 a month subscription. So, you know, it's next to nothing, just while we build the brand. And life is immeasurably better than it was. And then in last July, I broke my own rules. So I always had a rule that I wouldn't use my own website because it felt morally wrong charging people to take money off them to then cream off the best men for myself. And yeah, I got an approach on Widow's Fire. So I thought, oh, well, that's okay. It's just casual, isn't it? It's not important. From a lovely, I mean, he's not quite George Clooney, but he's not far off. The silver-haired fox. And we had a very fiery Widow's Fire date. And then we had 6 more of those. And after 6 dates, he looked at me and he said, I think this is a chapter 2, actually. And I know. And so we're 9 months in, and I've been at his house, which is where I am now, all weekend. It's been his daughter's 60th birthday. Our families are blended now. So my son's we've just all been out for dinner. It's evening here. We've all just been out for dinner. My son's hanging out with his kids next weekend, while me and Dan go to a festival for the weekend. So Finn's babysitting them. So it all works beautifully, and I've never been happier, I think.
That's amazing.
And arguably, in a sort of sliding doors moment, you know, I think I'm happier now than I was before Andy fell ill, if I'm brutally honest. And you know, that's a kind of tough one to say out loud and admit sometimes, but it is. I'm a different woman. You know, my experience redefined and shaped me. It's made me build an incredible business, turning pain into purpose. You know, it's shown me that I can survive anything and come out the other side. And yeah, I wouldn't be the woman I am today had I not gone through it. So, and I think if you'd have told me that in the midst of that darkness and that grief and that black place, I wouldn't have believed that there was hope. And you know, I can look back on it now and think, you know what, I'm glad. I'm glad I've experienced the life. I wouldn't, obviously I would have Andy back in a heartbeat, but my life would be very different to what it is now. You know, I wouldn't be living where I am. My son probably wouldn't. My son's about to go off to university to do fashion in London. He might not have taken that course. Our lives would be very different. And sometimes, you can't always think that they would have been better. I'm a huge believer in fate, and life throws up what it throws up, and sometimes you question why it's happening to you. Why me? It was a question that rang through my ears for years, and now it feels like the pieces in the puzzle are coming together, and I'm in a really good place.
It's amazing, and I'm so glad that you've come out on the other end and you've found love again, and you've done the work to heal yourself, because that is, must have been incredibly difficult to make that decision to say, I've had enough. Yeah.
Well, it kind of, if I hadn't, I wouldn't be here to tell the tale. It got to that rock bottom. There was no other way than admitting I was an alcoholic and that it had taken control of my life, and I needed professional help to get me out of that situation. And for anyone who feels like they're in that, I tell you, if anyone had told me 3 years ago that I'd be happy saying I'd never drink again, I would never have believed you, ever. And now the thought of alcohol is abhorrent. And if I can do it, kind of anyone can, because I was a very, very bad alcoholic.
And would you say that sort of progressed from that first downing of the bottle when Andy had the heart attack? Did it slowly progress over the 3 years, and then when he passed, it intensified?
Yeah. So, initially when Andy was ill and in the coma, yes, it was, I was drinking a lot those couple of weeks. When I found out that he was never getting better, then I wasn't drinking in the mornings, but I'd drink at lunchtime. And then before you know it, you're drinking at breakfast, and you're waking up in the night to have a drink because you sobered up and your body's screaming for alcohol. And so, it was a slow deterioration and decline. But, within the space of 3 years, I was a raging alcoholic.
But it must be really difficult with the withdrawal symptoms. And that what makes it even more difficult. It's the withdrawal symptoms.
And I got to the point where you can't, if you are an alcoholic at that level, you can't stop drinking safely on your own, because you will have a seizure and you will die. So that's why I tried to stop on my own, had a seizure, ended up in a hospital, and they did a sort of a detox on the NHS there, which is like, they safely withdraw you from alcohol and then just release you without any kind of aftercare. And obviously on the way home from the hospital, I went to the supermarket and bought alcohol. It needed, 28 days of private medical care in a very swanky rehab centre to make me see sense. But thankfully I had medical insurance. So, that was fine. But I couldn't have done it on my own.
And it became your coping mechanism, because, that was such an extreme, extreme events all of a sudden. It's not like, his heart attack was within hours, days. Your life completely changed.
Yeah, literally in a heartbeat is kind of how I describe it, and your life can change in a heartbeat. And the other thing I think about being widowed is it gives you a very different perspective on life. I have a kind of seize the day moment, attitude every day. Never say no to an opportunity, book the flight, eat the cake. It's like, it just, don't take this life for granted, because it can and it does change in a heartbeat. And, I'm grateful for every day I have here in this world now, and for every second I have with my beautiful son that, my poor husband missed out on. I went last week and sat where we've got a bench where his ashes are scattered near the house where we used to live, overlooking the river. It's a beautiful spot. And I went and sat and talked to Andy. I don't believe, I'm not religious, I don't believe in God, but I talked to him. And, I was telling him how proud he'd be of this beautiful little boy who's become an incredible man. And, I'm sad. I can look back without raw pain and emotion now. I can look back very fondly of the times me and Andy shared together, and the beautiful memories we made, and the fabulous little boy that we created. And that's a different chapter in my life now, and I'm an entirely different woman. through this kind of midlife period that I know you're talking about.
Absolutely. And I think that's so important, is that these awakenings are there for a reason. There's lessons to be learned. There's growth that needs to happen. And unfortunately, sometimes it happens in a way that is shocking and extreme. But it forces us to wake up and to move towards our authentic self.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I would never have chosen this path, but
no.
I've certainly hit acceptance, which is the final stage of grief. I've certainly hit acceptance, and if anything, I'm now embracing the new deck I've been dealt, and making the very best of it.
So why do you think it is that so many high functioning women who are alcoholics, why is it such a struggle to come to terms with the fact that they have a problem and to seek help?
Because it's the one thing you can't control. And if you're highly functioning, you're usually somewhere on the spectrum, and kind of, I'm used to running a business, being in control, making the decisions, calling the shots. And I think, I also think I grew up in a very booze laden culture. It was in the UK, we had this kind of ladette culture that you keep up with the boys and you drink as hard as they were, and I was in the boardroom with men and behaving along those kind of habits. I just think alcohol is incredibly dangerous of all the drugs there are. I think it destroys more lives, and it doesn't just destroy the lives of the person who has the addiction. It's those poor people around them. And it's still advertised on the TV.
Socially acceptable.
It's on the Christmas. It's on the end of every aisle at every supermarket. I used to buy myself a wine advent calendar so I could start each day with wine. I mean, what is that about? But alcohol runs through everything, and it's an incredibly dangerous substance, I think.
Yeah. And we've made it socially acceptable. We've made it a part of our celebrations, our lives.
Although it's nice to see with Finn's generation that there seems much less drinking isn't part of their culture.
Okay.
So that's refreshing that I see younger people who aren't, I on his 18th birthday, it was my 1 year anniversary of being sober. Ironically, I took him out and bought him a drink, but I didn't have one. But that was probably the first alcohol he'd ever have. I think my aversion therapy course worked quite well on him, to be honest. But it's probably put him off the line.
Yeah. Now you came to fully embrace your bisexuality.
Yes, indeed. Yes. Yeah, I mean, I've always been bisexual. I lived as a lesbian for 4 years before I met my husband. So one of my very first jobs was as a naked podium dancer in a very famous nightclub called the Hacienda in Manchester in the UK on their gay night called Flesh. And then I used to run a gay nightclub for a few years, and I was living with a lady called Sarah for a while, and then a lady called Claudia. I had a Portuguese girlfriend for a while, and I was very happily identifying and living as a lesbian at that point. And then I fell for a DJ at the nightclub who was a man, and I then wrestled with my sexuality for a bit and was bisexual, and was fairly comfortable with bisexuality at that point. When I met Andy, I was very open about it. And I always say that actually I fall for people, not for genitals. I can have a good time with anything. It's not that. It's about the person. And Andy happened to be a man. It wasn't like I'd made a conscious decision to marry a man and have what would be seen as a conventional, normal, heterosexual relationship. It just happened to be a man. It could have happened to be a woman. It made any difference. But when Andy died, I saw that as an opportunity to explore my bisexual side. And me and my partner Dan, who is a man, we practice ethical non-monogamy. So and I think again that's come from being widowed. He's a widower. Obviously, I met him on my app. And we both have a let's live for the moment attitude, and therefore it was he knew very much that I was embracing my bisexuality as a widow, and as most straight men are, he was quite keen to encourage that. I mean, that's just a typical bloke thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so we were very open from the beginning that we wanted both to practice ethical non-monogamy, and that works very well for us. Doesn't work for everybody, but it certainly works for me. And I think as a widow, you just think, oh yeah, absolutely, save every moment. I mean, I used to joke to Andy that I would give him a threesome for his 60th. Well, he never got to 60, did he? So he never got to see that. And it's like, and that sort of experience makes you very, very liberated, I think, in your approach to life later.
I love it. Yeah. I love that. And so you had identified as bisexual before you got married. Did people always assume that you were heterosexual because you were in
the
this
minute you get
marriage?
married, the minute that was it. I was there. It was almost like, I mean, I remember my dad thinking, oh, thank God she's grown out of that phase. It's like that kind of thing. And then obviously now, I'm like to my dad, have you met my, this is my latest girlfriend? And he's like, well, you're with Dan. I'm like, yeah, but that's fine these days, Dan. It's fine. That's how it works. And my son's gay, and he loves the fact that, his mum's got this wild, crazy gay past. So, yeah. And when I take him to Pride, I'm a very proud bee in the LGBTQ community, and anyone can love anyone, can't they?
Yeah, and that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. It's about love, isn't it? Yeah, not about judgment, not about this or that. It's just love, and we should be expressing it more towards each other, regardless of gender or anything else, really.
Exactly.
I think the world would be a better place if we all
definitely would
embrace that.
The
definitely.
World needs more love.
Yeah. So you've built this entire ecosystem of communities, widows, sober daters, for people rethinking alcohol. Where does the drive to build these come from?
For me, it's about solving problems, and it's about bringing people together as a community. I'm a huge social creature, and I know that the one thing that got me through being widowed was the widow community and the peer-to-peer support that happened within that. I mean, so much so I've launched a community not-for-profit called the Widow Collective, which is I recognise that I was dealing with widows, but only when they were ready to date. And actually, I wanted to be able to help all widows. In the UK, we have a charity called Widowed and Young that helps people who are widowed under the age of 51. And I found great solace and help in their services. And I realised now I'm 55, I wouldn't have been able to access that. And I don't think I'd be quite in as good a place as I am now. So I launched the Widow Collective, a not-for-profit with 8 other widows and widowers that I know as a board to help give back to the widow community wherever we can. Yeah, I'm a huge believer in the power of community. And I take great joy in bringing people together. I mean, chapter 2, we've had 5 marriages. So we've even had a chapter 2 baby. I thought we were all beyond baby making, but some of our youngest members got together and made a baby, which is lovely. I love making stuff, creating stuff. I drive myself mad with ideas. I've got 5 other business ideas I want to do, but time.
That's an entrepreneur for you. You're a true-blooded entrepreneur at the end of the day. Yeah. And I think people underestimate the power of community. I think it's really important, and we forget that we're actually cultural beings. Like, we need community, we need support. So it's great. Like, the more communities we can create, the better, I think, because we've moved too far away from community, and I think we need to start coming back.
Yeah.
Definitely coming back to community. So for anyone who right now is quietly unraveling and maybe going through the same difficult time that you went through, what would you want that person to hear right now?
To know that this will pass, as a mantra, this will pass, and you will find a way to navigate your way through something. But be gentle on yourself, don't have to solve everything overnight. Don't drink would be my other piece of advice. You can't drown grief or sorrow with red wine. Believe me, I tried and it doesn't work. You may think it's it's going to numb the pain, but it's a depressant, not an antidepressant. And to seek professional help. I've spent a fortune on counselling and therapy and rehab, and it has been the best investment in me and my life I could have made. I'm a huge believer that you can't solve big problems on your own. You do need professional help for that, and there's no shame in seeking help or asking for help.
Because I was going to ask you, I was going to say, the drinking was probably your way of avoiding the grief and avoiding.
Absolutely. The one thing rehab taught me was to sit with my feelings.
Yeah.
And to not hide them.
And sometimes that can feel,
It is okay to feel absolutely devastated.
Yeah.
That's fine. And allow yourself the time to do that and the space to do that. And you have to do that to get through, grief. As widows, we don't move on, but we do move forward.
And sometimes it can feel so overwhelming, I think. Mm-hmm. Those feelings can feel so overwhelming. But, I mean, you are showing that you're a testament that facing the grief head on, it's worth it at the end.
Yeah, it is. And you have to go through that to find the other side. Yeah. But there is another side. It might not feel like there is, but there is.
Yeah.
And a really good analogy that a counselor gave me was that at the beginning, grief is a huge rock on your back. And by the end, it's a pebble in your pocket. It'll always be there. Yeah. You will always feel it. And it's fundamentally changed the woman I am, that loss. But I can now live with it, even happily live with it as part of my life, and accept that is something I will carry forever. But I wouldn't be who I am doing what I'm doing today had that not happened.
That's well said. Beautiful. Thank you. So one more question, and I ask this to all my guests. If you could tell your younger self one thing, what would that be?
It's going to be okay. Yeah, it's going to be okay.
And a big hug.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if people want to find your apps or find you, where can they go?
I mean, I'm all over the internet. If you just Google Nicky Wake, Nicky Wake, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Insta, I'm on Substack, I am... you can also find me at nickywake.com, and then the actual apps are chapter2dating.app, widowsfire.dating, SoberLove.app, and if you're after our community site, it's thewidowedcollective.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Nicky, for coming on today and for sharing your story. Thank you. I just want to say another big thank you to Nicky for coming on and sharing her story. That conversation was a masterclass in resilience. From the darkest days of anticipatory grief and high-functioning alcoholism to sobriety, entrepreneurship, and a second chapter of love she calls happier than her first. If there's one thing to take from today's episode, it's this. Grief doesn't disappear, but it changes shape. As Nicky put it, it starts as a rock on your back and eventually becomes a pebble in your pocket. You carry it, but it stops carrying you. If you're going through something that feels unsurvivable right now, please hear what Nicky said. This will pass. Don't try to drown it, and there is no shame in asking for professional help. You can find Nicky across social media by searching Nicky Wake or head to nickywake.com. Her apps, chapter2dating.app, widowsfire.dating, and soberlove.app, along with her nonprofit, The Widow Collective, are all linked in the show notes. If this episode moved you, I'd love it if you'd subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who might need to hear it today. You can also now catch the podcast on YouTube if you'd like to watch the video. I'm Odelia, and this has been another episode of the Midlife Awakening. Until next week, take care of your heart, take care of yourself, and remember, it's never too late to begin again. Bye for now.